Well, hello and welcome to the OnStage Colorado podcast for January 14th. I'm Alex Miller.
And I'm Tony Tresca, and today we are joined by a very special guest, senior arts journalist at the Denver Gazette and founder of the Denver Actors Fund, John Moore.
Hey.
Hello, Tony. Hello, Alex. Hello, Colorado theater community. How you doing?
Good. It's great to have you on, John. We had you on the pod a few years ago, and we had so many tech problems, and it was a disaster. And we've been trying to get you back on, so we're glad you're here today. And we want to talk about your the True West Award winners that you do every December. And talk about that, and we'll talk a little bit about the state of arts journalism going into 2025. So all things that I know you have a lot of interest in. So. But before we get to that, we wanted to get to the question that's on everybody's mind. Is like, we heard a rumor. Actually, you told me. How much time that you actually took some time off. You're like, never take time off. So how'd you do over the break? Are you all rested up? And
I've been spending my break from my work at the Denver Gazette doing accounting for the end of the year books for the Denver Actors Fund. So whereas other people go to a beach, I go to my desk and I just do different work.
Yeah,
that's how fun I am.
Wow. Okay. Well,
that's sad. I'm sorry. Yeah,
that's okay.
Well, I know another thing that you also got up to was your January 6th performance of Waiting for Obama at Miners Alley in Golden. That was a benefit for the Denver's Actor Fund, which I'm so sorry to have missed that. But how did it go? How was the reading?
It was really a special experience, and I don't usually talk in those kind of terms when it's my own stuff. But it was a kind of a remarkable confluence of time and opportunity. I feel like, for people who don't know, I wrote this play called Waiting for Obama in 2016. It was commissioned for the New York Fringe Festival, and they wanted a play about guns in America in the final months of the Obama administration. And it was sort of inspired by this idea of saying, I've been listening for 8 years to people say, Obama's coming for your guns, Obama's coming for your guns. And I thought, well, what if he did? What would happen? Wouldn't that be kind of fun to look into? So we did it in New York. We turned it into a big all Colorado production. Everyone in the show was making their New York stage debuts. It was a wonderful experience, but it's a play very much of its time. And I thought that I didn't even try to get it licensed or really fully staged in Colorado. I just did it and sort of moved on. But the last 8 years have sort of incorporated, I don't know, an entire generation of change in the discourse, in the way that we talk to each other, in politics in America, in civility, all those things. And so as the kind of rails that we've fallen off the rails in terms of being able to just talk about things in America, that with the anniversary of January 6th coming up and with the inauguration of Donald Trump coming up, there were several people who just put the idea in my head, like, why don't we just have one night where people who are feeling trepidation or fear or great enthusiasm and excitement, depending on what your political leanings are, a place to get together and sort of talk about where we're at this particular moment. And with everything that's going on in the landscape, just the idea of just sort of slipping back in time to 8 years ago when you could have discourse, but it was more civil discourse. I think it was a salve, I think, for the people who were there to just sort of remember what it was like to have a president where you could have a conversation that didn't have to involve cutting each other down and name calling and just petty politics. You could actually talk about ideas, and it was a night of ideas, and I think that it was a pretty special night.
Yeah, it was. I was really happy to see that it was, almost a full house. A lot of people showed up. There was lots of folks from the theater community there, and I really enjoyed the play that you wrote, John. I hadn't read it before or seen anything, so I thought it was a really interesting way to address the topic, and yeah, it's both a piece of its time, but also still plenty relevant. So yeah, it's really, really enjoyable. I'm glad, and hopefully made a chunk of change for the DAF to help folks out.
Yeah, people were very generous. We raised just over $2,000, which made the whole thing worthwhile. Everybody donated their time. Um, yeah, I just feel like there was a special energy in the room. In fact, we actually oversold the event, but as weather in January does, it scared away about 30 people. So there were some empty seats, but it was fully sold out, and all the actors donated their time, and Miners Alley Playhouse went out of their way to make all of their staff available to us. It was a true demonstration of community, I think.
Yeah. Yep. So congrats on that. I didn't
Thanks.
see anything else recently, just because it's just this kind of interregnum between the Christmas season and the start of the new season, which really kind of kicks off this weekend, I would say. There's a few things up, but I haven't been to anything other than that. What about Tony? You got out and saw some of this stuff at the Sea Film Center, right?
That's right. Yeah. So on Saturday, January 11th, I went to see the second showing and as a part of their screening for January Giallo, which is a Italian style of horror. It kind of inspired by Agatha Christie novels that has excessive violence and really cynical depictions of humanity. So perfect for horror. And it was I went and saw this really interesting 2001 film called Valentine about this Cupid-faced killer who was coming back to kill people who had spurned him at a middle school dance. And he was killing people in all these really cheeky Valentine's-y Day ways, which is just right up my alley. I love holiday horror. I'm a big horror guy, and so this was really fun. It was a part of their Screen series that they do, which is they just host a bunch of spooky screenings monthly.
Could I interrupt you real quick, Tony?
Absolutely.
So you said 2001, right? So
that's right.
What's it like for a guy like you to go to the cinema and see these movies from the before times, like before you were born?
I quick correction. I was alive in 2001. I would have just been 1 year old. So I was not able to see Valentine in theater. You are correct. So this was definitely my first time. And it was interesting. I think there were quite a Keith Garcia, who's the artistic director there, asked everybody how many people had seen Valentine before. It was kind of a healthy mix of people who had seen it, but most of the crowd had not seen it. So that made it particularly fun with all the jump scares and everything. We were all screaming and whatnot.
Yeah. So Valentine for you is what, I don't know, Citizen Kane was for Alex and I. So.
It's a good way to put it.
I've never heard of it, but so for those who don't know, Tony also works on another podcast that comes out, I don't know, once or twice a month. It's all about horror. So you want to plug that real quick, Tony?
Yeah, it's called Such a Nightmare: Conversations About Horror. It's I host it with one of my former professors. Her name is Dr. Catherine Troyer, and she actually got her PhD in horror literature and horror analysis. And so we just dive deep into horror, good and bad, from kind of an academic perspective on that show.
Yep. So if you're into horror, it's the podcast for you. So before we dive into our main topic, I just wanted to quickly tease our interview this week. Later in the podcast, we're talking to Jake Brasch. I'm actually talking to him tomorrow as you're hearing this. So hopefully he is. This happens so that I don't have to edit this, but he's a Colorado playwright whose new dark comedy, The Reservoir, opens at the Denver Center this week. And all three of us, I think, heard a reading of the play at the Denver Center's New Play Festival in 2023. And I think it's fair to say we're all pretty intrigued and excited by it. It's funny, touching, and pretty intense, as the main character has come to Denver from NYU and struggling mightily with sobriety. And we are I think really looking forward to seeing the show, and I'm excited to talk to Jake tomorrow. And I think you guys have talked to him before, haven't you?
Yeah, he's a kid who went to Denver School of the Arts, and he's just a real success story and a sweetheart of a human being. I think this play is a real culmination of how should I put it? It's a triumph for local playwrights. He left Colorado pretty quickly after high school, but this is a Denver story, and it's going to be getting not only the largest stage at the Denver Center, but it's going to be performed in as a tri-production in LA and I believe Atlanta. And
that's right.
It's you don't see these kind of successes for local playwrights at this level very often, and I think we should all take some notice of this and champion the work of all local playwrights. It's a win for everyone.
Absolutely.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I'm really excited to chat with Jake a little bit more about that later this week. I'll be going over to the Denver Center to just chat with Jake a little bit before his rehearsal for the show, because he's actively still workshopping it with the Denver Center, which I think is just a really cool thing for a local playwright, like you were saying, John. So I'm really excited to check out that full production, because the reading was just such an interesting meditation on the kind of parallels between addiction and aging from a really personal level that I think it just really warrants a full production. So,
Yep. Yeah, so that'll be coming up a little bit later. So, main topic today, of course, we have John Moore here, who started the True West Awards. So originally were the Ovation Awards when you were at the Denver Post. So, John, you can explain it better than I certainly can. They're your baby. So can you give a quick explainer about what the True West Awards are?
Sure. When things have changed in journalism so much, I started out as a theater critic at the Denver Post in 2001, and it seemed very appropriate at that time that the lead writer, at a time when we had specialists, like, I mean, it's so funny to think of it now that we had somebody covering comedy, somebody covering film, somebody covering TV, somebody covering pop music, somebody covering underground music. I covered theater, and I didn't realize at that time that was going to be going away quite so fast. But I spent 12 years at the Post, focused entirely on the Colorado theater community. I took that responsibility very seriously. And at the end of the year, I did very traditional awards called the Ovation Awards. And they were exactly what you would expect. They were categories and nominees. And we printed something like 270 names in the paper on one Sunday. And then 2 weeks later, you'd find out who won. And it seemed appropriate. Denver Post had a circulation of something like 575,000 on Sundays at that time, and it was hard to be in a position where you have to be an arbiter of what you thought was the best. It was just one person's opinion. I never said my opinion was more or less valid than any other person's, but I picked a winner, and that was lovely for the winners, and it turned out could be quite painful for those who didn't win. But it just, you think of awards, it's like the Tony Awards or the Oscars, just goes with the territory that 80% of your nominees are going to lose. But like I said, it seemed appropriate for my role at the Denver Post. But when I left the Post, I kind of had a come to Jesus. This is around the time I was starting the Denver Actors Fund and reevaluating everything in my life. And one of those things was awards. And I just decided I didn't want to be a guy whose very dedicated and heartfelt work on behalf of this community causes trauma, and awards cause trauma. They just do. But I wanted to have an end of the year project that acknowledged all the great work in the community without it having being something that was assumed or presumed. And so I had this notion of the True West Awards, which I call 30 days, 30 bouquets. As a journalist, I don't look at them as awards as much as I look at them as a review of the year. So it's an opportunity, an insane opportunity to write a story a day for 31 days. And I'm sure the pure volume of it probably drove people crazy. But I used it as an opportunity to go, you know what, I want to look back at the year, and I want to remind people of good stories of the year, and I want to tell stories that I haven't had a chance to tell all year. But I want every day to be a bouquet. It's the holiday season. I wanted it to be people to be surprised by what they opened up it's not the paper anymore, but to find out who that day's honoree was. I wanted it to be flowers on a doorstep. I wanted people to just go, oh, it's nice to be acknowledged, but in this format where you're just saying, you know what, attention should be paid to Mayor Trevathan, right? One of my favorite ones from this year is looking back at a story that when it was going on, they preferred not to have it in the paper, but it was two longtime friends in the Colorado theater community, Mayor Trevathan and Jeree Hinshaw. Jeree was going through a health crisis with her husband that had been going on for years with his declining kidney function. And just to fast forward, Mayor was a match. Mayor donated her kidney. Jerry's husband is now living a much better, higher quality of life for his family and his son. And it was all made possible by theater because of the friendship that happened between these two. And it was exactly the kind of story I want to be telling in December. And some people knew it, some people didn't, but the story hadn't been told yet. And it was kind of the quintessential point of these things, which is, isn't that nice? And I wanted every day there to be something in there that just gave some people some positivity, uplifted some people, and made some people feel seen. And so that's what the spirit of the awards were, and that's the insane challenge that I took on of trying to do one of those a day through a holiday season when people are supposed to be taking days off. But I did not.
That's a lot of work. That is a lot of work.
You're kind of like a Santa during the month, so delivering all these presents to the theater community throughout that we get to unwrap. I don't know. You said you were worried about overwhelming us. I always enjoyed waking up to the Facebook posts in the morning and seeing whom was selected and which stories you chose to elevate. The story about the kidney donor with Mare was a particularly beautiful one. I also but there were so many. I thought your profile of Caitlin Lowens and their journey within the theater community and Colorado Springs was also really well written, but there were so many throughout. Alex, did you have a favorite?
Yeah, the kidney one definitely struck me. But one of our big kind of theater heroes this year was, or 2024, and I'm sure she'll be rocking it again this year, is Ann Terza Schwartz, who had these boffo performances, several of them over the course of the year. And so it was great to see John calling her out as just having like this. It's always fun when you see an actor like just break out and just have an amazing year, and they just get like these roles that are perfect for them, and all of a sudden you're just like, whoa, of course she's been at it for a while, but it was like she really made a big splash.
Well, when you look at the plays and musicals that she was in this year, I mean, there are breakout years, and then there's, oh my God, she carried so much work. There are good years and there are years for the ages. But I'll be honest with you, I wasn't sure that was the kind of thing I wanted to do an entire day for, but I started giving it more thought. And the reason, and I've only started to get her to know her over the past year, but she's an extraordinary like human being on this planet. And I got to know her a bit, not through theater, but through the Denver Actors Fund. And I can only tell this story because she talks about it herself. We started an affordable mental health care program at the Denver Actors Fund, and she signed up for it, and she received help for it for as much time as she needed for it, and then she moved on. One thing at the Denver Actors Fund is we ask anybody, like, is it okay if we tell your story? And about half of them say, I'd prefer you don't, and half say, yeah, sure. We've never asked anybody in our mental health program whether we could sort of, use their example as for the good that program does. And I guess I was sort of furthering the stigma about mental health by just assuming that we shouldn't tell those stories. And what I love about Anne is that when she was starring in Waitress, and the Arvada Center decided to do collections for the Denver Actors Fund, and volunteered as the star of the show to make the pitch. And when we talked, she said, "I'm going to use my personal story about how much you helped me with mental health at a time that I really needed it." And I was like, "Man, that's getting into some pretty sensitive territory." And she's like, "Shut up! It's it needs to be told, and it needs to be out there." And the fact that she used her own story and the good that she got out of that to encourage other people not to be shy away from getting mental health care because it's available to everyone in the Colorado theater community. It just opened my eyes to even more to what a special human being she is. And I thought that just I just needed to take a day and celebrate her.
Right. That's great. I didn't know there was a mental health element to DAF either. I do know, a lot of times it's medical stuff, but there's also a pet program too as well, right?
That was a development from 2024 that we're really proud of. Well, I guess it's been about a year and a half now, but it's controversial. Pretty much anything I do is controversial, whether I want it to be or not. But when one of our former board members, who's an emergency room doctor, came up with the idea of well, we're helping people with their medical bills. What's really the difference between a pet medical bill and a personal medical bill. If you have a dog or a cat and you don't have pet insurance, and they swallow something and they're going to need a $10,000 surgery, and you've got to be able to pay for it on the spot, or else you might have to make some really horrifying decisions about whether or not they're going to put that animal down. It was like a light bulb going off for us, where we were saying, you know, it may be a bill for a pet, but if you're legally responsible for it, money is money and you owe it. And it's even harder to come up with that kind of money in a pet situation, because oftentimes they won't do the surgery if you can't prove that you've got the credit. So people get mired in these 22, 23% care credit programs. And when you do that, when you get stuck with like essentially the equivalent of a used car loan, the next time there's auditions for a show at Miners Alley Playhouse, you might have had to take a third job at Snooze or at a bar in order to make your new $275 monthly payment that you're going to be making for the next 10 years. And you might say, I can't do that show because I got to work. We've always tried from the very beginning to take money out of the equation so people can focus on what we want them to be doing, which is performing. And that's been the greatest thing of all. But we predicted, and it turned out to be true, that there are several donors who do not want their money going to save animals. So we knew from the very beginning we had to start a completely separate pool of money for the Pause Fund, so that those people who donate to the Denver Actors Fund can be assured that their money is being used for what they think that what we've told them the money is going to be going for. So the Denver Actors Fund will pay down your medical bills, and the Pause Fund will pay down your pet medical expenses, but they don't cross over because I don't know why, but there are some people out there who just think it's somewhat frivolous. But by keeping them separate, we keep hopefully everybody happy.
Yeah, that's great. And there's definitely people, if you're not a dog lover or a cat lover, you might not relate to what those animals mean to people. And I wasn't, I certainly wouldn't have been the person that wouldn't say don't use my money for that. But it was only maybe 4 or 5 years ago that I got the real meaningful animal in my life, and it's like she's just there's no way I would I understand how important that is. It's just it's a family member. So
I don't mean to offend people when I say this, but they're better than people. They just are.
They're certainly less judgmental than people. I'll give you that.
Yes,
that's true. That's true. Anyway, I strayed from your point of the True West Awards. Sorry about that.
That's okay. Well, you can go on the Denver Gazette site and see all of these, ones. We can't get through all of them, but there are a couple I wanted to ask about, and they kind of were the last few that you did: impact plays, musicals, and seasons, and then talk about the theater persons of the year.
Sure.
Do you want to touch on some of those?
Yeah, that's where I get to be a little bit contradictory. Those are the closest ones to like true awards. So I actually was thinking about not even doing them this year because they are subjective. They are people, but we all go to 150, 160 shows a year. You two know exactly what it's like. You're watching throughout the year, and you're watching some people emerge. You're watching some people who just show up over and over and over again. And I didn't want to do like best actor in a play, but if I see somebody, like a Brian Watson or someone, and I've never even met him, but I'm seeing him in play after play after play, and going, attention should be paid, because these are the stories of the year. And so, a guy like Colton Pratt, another one I hadn't met before at TheaterWorks, but he's been doing it for years. It's kind of nice to just reach out over, miles and theater companies and kind of just go, hey, I noticed. I don't know what that means to you, but I hope it means something to you that I noticed. The problem is, just like with real awards, when you're doing like peak seasons, as I was doing, my list, and I'm sure if you did the same thing, your list would start with 50 people, and you got to work it down to whether it's 5 or 10 or 1 or whatever it is. Either way, you have to you have to make some pretty cutthroat, hard decisions to get it down to a manageable number when there's so many people who deserve to be acknowledged. And so I kept trying to tell people these are in large part meant to be representative. When I was honoring volunteers, when I was honoring understudies, I was hoping that while you have to focus on one or two people, that people would feel, oh, he notices stage managers. That's a good thing. I feel a little bit more seen because another stage manager got a day in the sun. I hope that that's true. But I think you're asking specifically about impact plays, impact musicals. Those are the ones that really kind of tell the story of your year. And I don't know. I'd love to have a conversation with you because I'd love to get your thoughts on the year. But it was a bit of an up and down year. When you boil everything down to the impact plays and the impact musicals, I'm sure your lists might be very different from mine. But when I look at things like plays and I see things like, and if you had told me at the beginning of the year that a play about the Lehman Brothers was going to be the thing that completely rocked my world at the Denver Center, but also locally, that Mark Reagan, of all people, who is running a theater company, also turns out to be a bit of a playwright, and he adapted An Enemy of the People into something that just completely caught me off guard. I did not expect an adaptation of any play from the 1860s, 1880s to be able to watch that and just go, oh my God, he has not significantly changed the circumstances. He's not overloading the language to turn this into a political polemic in 2024. But you couldn't watch that play and not say, oh my God, this is the pandemic.
Yeah.
This is Trumpism. This is everything that we are fighting about right now. Greed, lack of concern for your fellow person, putting your own self-interest before all else, letting people die if it's gonna affect your profit margin. All of these things are things that we are seeing right in front of us. And who would have thought? I'm going to shut up and let you guys talk. But when I saw Enemy of the People, I was like, that's the most urgent play I saw all year long.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that. It really was an eye opener, and it drove home the fact that this shit that we're dealing with now is nothing new. It comes around and around and around, and it's unfortunate, but also maybe gives us a little hope that it also passes at some point. But yeah, Mark did a nice job with that adaptation, and I knew he had to cut a lot of stuff, out of like what was, I think, like a 3-hour play or something like that.
And
Tony, you want to add something to that?
I was just going to say, and kind of speaking of Mark was another kind of honoree for your theater persons of the year. Mark Reagan and Jessica Robley over at Betsy, just kind of for their work, and particularly you talked quite a bit about Mark's advocacy that he did for not only Betsy but the entire theater community, and the financial support that he gives to companies like Boulder Ballet, the Colorado Shakespeare Festival, local theater. And so I just wanted to hear a little bit more about kind of your thought process for how you selected those two to be your theater persons of the year.
Well, thanks for that. For having done it for as long as I've done, I start a Google Doc like on January 1st, and I just start taking notes for things I don't want to forget by the time December comes around. And honestly, when I looked at who was the Colorado Theater Person of the Year, and I really started in November to just kind of go, well, I have to decide this quickly because everything kind of revolves around whoever you're going to choose. You got to set up a photo shoot. You've got to do interviews and things like that. So you kind of have to know what the story of the year was. I don't think I've ever had a year like this one where I did not have a big long list of people. I looked at what Jessica and Mark was doing. Now Mark is a very unusual presence in this community as a human being. I'm looking now for like how I described him in the story. I just said, he's a unicorn, and I'm like, well, as a writer, that's not enough. That doesn't really quite grasp what's going on here. So I called him a rainbow-colored leprechaun with a unicorn horn and a pot of gold that he shares freely. because I mean, you guys know he's a character. But it's not just that here's a guy with a lot of money and he spreads it out. He's spreading it out to his competitors. He's spreading it out to people who are competing, even though they don't like to use that word, in the same community for the same audience. But when you think about it, it's brilliant. He's supporting the Colorado Shakespeare Festival, which frankly only needs to have an audience for about 2 months a year. Betsy is providing theater year round. And so there might be a moment where somebody's like, well, honey, tonight we could go see something at Betsy, or we could go see something at the Colorado Shakespeare Festival. Isn't it strange that the guy who's from Betsy is the primary sponsor of the Colorado Shakespeare Festival? But if it's all about rising boats, and it's about building an audience that loves theater, who, if you see something that you love, you want more, and you don't want to wait till the next Colorado Shakespeare Festival season. You're gonna develop that audience over the year by hopefully getting them in as season ticket holders. So there is a self-interest that's the best kind of self-interest, because it's about building community and building theater goers for life. The fact that he's willing to spend that much money on, and in other disciplines, you mentioned the Boulder Ballet, shows that he's really not in this to crush anyone. He's in this to really build up an ecology. And I think in the wake of this story that I wrote, I know that there are some national magazines that have contacted me, and they're like, this guy's not for real, is he? And I'm like, yeah. And he potentially could be a model for other communities who are looking for a way out, because as I mentioned in the story, Tony, it's not that unusual that a company has a benefactor. I mean, you can't exist without one. But to have your benefactor also be the guy who's the managing director of the company, who's making some creative decisions along with Jess, who is contributing to the making of the art by, as we mentioned, adapting a really tough book, like or a play, like An Enemy of the People, into something that audiences can digest. It's really artful. And, we have a very ribbing kind of relationship, Mark and I, because, I tease him, he teases me, whatever. But I just, at the end of the year, the thing that put it completely over the top is that he partnered brilliantly with Jessica Robley, somebody who admits in the story that she had no business being hired as the artistic director of Betsy. She felt like she didn't have any of the commiserate experience that she needed. And, she had a year of her own that would, that's a year for the ages. The directing that she did, the one woman play that she did, the adapting that she did. I mean, she's a real triple threat. And you put those two together, I didn't see anybody who is moving the needle in the Colorado theater community in 2024 the way that those two did. I thought it was just a complete and total. I didn't have a runner-up. I didn't.
Yeah, and all goes without saying, they're also doing this while also selling out their own productions in just really incredible shows of force over at the Dairy Art Center in Boulder, which is a pretty impressive feat, and not one that a lot of companies in this post-pandemic landscape can boast.
Yeah, and just to prove that I'm not bought and paid for, I was the one on Colorado Gives Day who was teasing Mark Reagan relentlessly, because I don't know if you were getting the same emails that I was, but after about the 7th email of the day from Mark Reagan, he sent one out, and it was like, hey, everybody, I promise, this is the last email you're going to get from us today. And I was like, thank God, because I can't take one more email from Mark Reagan. And, sure enough, like 45 minutes later, he's like, one more thing. I'm like, that is quintessential Mark Reagan. And there's a charm about that. But he has certainly invigorated this community. It's good to have a sugar daddy. It's good to have somebody with all that kind of money. And if he's going to use it for good, then I'm all for it. Spend all your money on the arts, Mark. Go for it. Double down. He has completely shaken up the ecology. I mean, I called it Reaganomics in the story for a reason, because it's a whole new way of doing business. And I'm sure every theater company is like, "Where's our Mark Reagan?" And it's like, well, he's a unicorn. Sorry,
Yeah.
but at least we've got one.
Yep. Yep. So yeah, I thought that was well deserved, and kind of two different stories under the same umbrella there with Mark and Jess. But yeah, so so a reminder, you can see all these on the Denver Gazette, and really great notice to a lot of and a lot of stories that might have gone unheard in different ways that you called out, and it's a very different way that you cover the theater community, than we do. We focus more on reviews and things like that, and you've always been more about the people. And I think it's a great service you do there, but much appreciated.
Well, guys, I cannot tell you, after reviewing literally thousands of shows for the Denver Post, how happy I am that I am not the person reviewing the shows.
Yep.
And that you are. Because if you I don't know how anybody is a theater critic in 2024. It's just nothing but dicey waters out there. And it's tough. It would be very, very tough to be an objective critic with a high critical bar that come what may in 2024. I don't know. It's a conundrum to me. Alex, you and I have talked about that over and over throughout the year. But but before we leave this topic, can I shout out one other story just because I want to use it to shout out them?
Sure.
One of my favorite stories is related to a show that's opening this week. It was a story on Grayson Allensworth and Maya Eisbart, who are two 16-year-olds at Denver School of the Arts. They started a theater company when they were 12 years old during the pandemic. They've already done 5 main stage shows, completely produced by young people, fully orchestrated, choreographed, directed, all by young people. And the fun in writing their story now is that later this week at the Montview Presbyterian Church, it's on Colorado Boulevard, they are doing the teen edition of Hadestown, which is a monstrous creative undertaking. Yes. It's a gorgeous, beautiful show. I think it is the spring awakening of this decade. And I sat in on a rehearsal, and part of the fun of interviewing them was I'm like, what do you say to people who think that this is cute? And he's like, and Grayson just looked at me right in the eye, and he's like, I don't think anybody who comes to see the show is going to think it's cute. Because these are little professionals. This show I can't wait to see it. I haven't been this excited to see a play in a long time. It opens on January 15th. It only runs for 4 days. So the public is encouraged to go see it. Come with high expectations because they will be met. And these two young people are just remarkable. And I think they should be supported with your curiosity and your attendance if you're open to it. Plus, it's Hadestown, for goodness sake.
Great show.
So it's our first chance to see Hadestown done by a local company, and they all happen to be like 16. It's incredible.
That is insane. They're doing the regional premiere for Hadestown. Look at them go.
They really are. Yeah.
All right. Well, stick around, John. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll do our Colorado headliners, and you will be welcome presents to chime in where you want. So stick around. We'll be right back. OnStage Colorado is brought to you by the Aurora Fox Arts Center, presenting Gee's Bend. The play tells the powerful story of a family of quilters from the isolated town of Gee's Bend, Alabama, as they confront the struggles of segregation, household conflict, and the Southern Freedom Movement. The show runs from January 31st to February 23rd. Tickets at aurorafoxartscenter.org. OnStage Colorado receives support from Candlelight, presenting Rodgers and Hammerstein's classic musical Oklahoma, where a high-spirited rivalry between local farmers and cowboys provides a colorful background for Curly, a charming cowboy, and Lori, a feisty farm girl, to play out their love story. Running January 23rd through March 30th in Johnstown. Tickets at coloradocandlelight.com. Support for OnStage Colorado comes from the Boulder Ensemble Theater Company, Betsy, whose production of Hope and Gravity plays at the Denver Savoy January 23rd through February 16th, and at Boulder's Nomad Playhouse February 21st through 23rd. This puzzle of a play touches on love, sex, and the tenderness that lies just beneath the surface of our interconnected relationships. Tickets at betc.org. OnStage Colorado is brought to you by the Town Hall Arts Center, presenting Vanya and Sonia and Masha and Spike. Christopher Durang's outrageous farce is a take on the works of Chekhov that includes a fortune-telling cleaning woman, an aspiring young actress, a farmhouse full of secrets, sibling rivalries, resentments, and trysts for a raucous comedy that plays January 17th through February 9th. Tickets at townhallartscenter.org. All right, we're back and ready to hit this week's Colorado headliners. These are some of the upcoming shows that we think you should know about in no particular order. Tony, what have you got to start?
I'm starting us off with a familiar favorite, The 39 Steps. This opened this last weekend, January 11th, and it's being done at the Lincoln Center in Fort Collins. It's kind of a Hitchcockian 1930s thriller set in London. It features a cast of only 4 actors who play over 150 characters in this Tony Award-winning play. So it's a lot of fun. I know both you and I, Alex, saw this when it was at the Denver Center, and I've seen it a couple times before. It's really just fast-paced, kind of spy fun.
It is, yeah. So this is an OnStage Theater and Company production up in Fort Collins, and I just got the review in today from our Northern Colorado correspondent, Leela Einhorn, so I'll have that up on the site here pretty soon. My first one is I'm calling out Mary Poppins. I think this is a really fun show, and it's so friend of the pod, Julia Toby, her Give 5 Productions production folks are teaming with Parker Arts for another big, very familiar musical based on the original Disney film. So, and it was also noticed that this is the highest grossing film in 1964, which was my birth year. $103 million worldwide it made, and netted an Oscar for Julie Andrews and 4 others. So this will be at the Pace Center in Parker, January 17th through February 9th.
My next pick is totally different. This is not your Disney Mary Poppins. It's an intense play by Martin McDonough, The Beauty Queen of Leenane. It's running January 16th through the 26th at the People's Building in Aurora. And this is a dark show about this woman who is trapped in a rural town in Ireland. And she finally sees a way out when there is this handsome person who comes into the town. However, her dreams of escape are kind of pushed back against by her mother, who wants to keep her in the town. So this production is being done by Invictus Theater Company, which is kind of a newer Denver-based troupe who was founded in 2018. But they're going to be doing this over at the People's Building in Aurora for just 2 weekends. So check it out if you've never seen this show before.
I have to say, Beauty Queen of Leenane is so my wife is she's very picky about what she goes to, and Beauty Queen of Leenane, we saw it, and it must have been 10 or 15 years ago. I can't remember where it was, and it ruined her for dramatic plays for a while because she just hated it so much. And it is a very dark show, and it doesn't have a lot of light in it, or sort of anything resembling any kind of happy ending. But of course, I love Martin McDonough, and but this is definitely one of his gloomier pieces. So, what do you think of this play, John?
I love it.
Yeah.
No, there's a company that very kindly did a reading of Beauty Queen of Leenane last year for us at the People's Building, and I think the production that you're talking about was at I think it was The Edge at the time. Might have been Benchmark by then, but
maybe
Emily Peyton Davies, one of our truly great actors locally, was in that. I believe with Emma Messenger, and it's nothing excites me more than these plays that will just scrape out the soul of the human experience. And the fact that it's so Irish, and I'm Irish, and the things that we will do in our families that are against our own, that are to each other in order to keep the status quo of what we want. It's just such a uniquely Irish play, and I would say go and savor every dark and uncomfortable moment of it.
All right. Yeah, well, we will have a review of it. I think I can't remember who's going to it, but we will get to that one. My next one is on a lighter side. It's called Kid Detective, a Bill Dunge roman, and this is from Shifted Lens Theater Company, who I don't think they've done anything in a while. In fact, I have this big long list of theaters. Tony, did you have something to add there?
They did Cruel Intentions. They were the troupe who did that at the People's Building
Okay.
in last fall.
Okay, my mistake. But yeah, they were. So anyway, they're doing this at the Roaming Gnome Theater in Aurora. So this is, and it's January 11th through 26th, and it's the story is about Penny Pepper, the kid detective extraordinaire, maybe like an Encyclopedia Brown kind of character. And about a lost schnauzer, and there's a serial killer that slaughters all the other detectives in town. So I was thinking, well, maybe this isn't a kid's show necessarily. They say it's 12 plus. But anyway, she somehow joins the police force to help out, and all this stuff going on, and she's 10 and a half, so it's sounds like a fun show there from Shifted Lens at Roaming Gnome in Aurora.
Whatever you do, theater goers, do not confuse the kid detective with the beauty queen, because you could end up very, very confused if you do.
Yeah,
they are both in Aurora, but they are not the same content. No,
go see both. Go see both works. But yeah, sorry, can't help myself.
No, that's a good warning. You wouldn't want to. You wouldn't want to walk into one unexpectedly.
Don't warning.
My next one is over at Curious Theater Company. It is the regional premiere of Samuel Hunter's play A Case for the Existence of God. It's being directed by Warren Sherrill, and it unfolds in a cubicle where two people who are seated next to each other choose to bring one another into their fragile worlds. It stars Keith, a mortgage broker, and Ryan, a yogurt plant worker, who's seeking to buy a plot of land that belonged to his family many decades ago, but they realize they share a specific kind of sadness, and that leads them to kind of talk about the bonds that they face and the challenges of parenthood in the modern day. So previews for this begin January 16th, and it opens January 18th and runs through the 16th of February.
I would just add to that if people enjoyed The Whale, written also by Samuel D. Hunter, if you saw The Great Wilderness at Benchmark, another Samuel D. Hunter play, when I directed The Treasure at Miners Alley Playhouse, not a Samuel D. Hunter play, but Samuel D. Hunter just directed The Treasure himself up in Idaho. He tends to take on these great divides among people who are looking for their identity and looking for a place to call home in parts of the country that you would not think would be very welcoming for them. And it's all about, finding a way to find a home in the great wilderness, so to speak. And I'm imagining this play is going to be a lot like that, but I don't know that much about it.
Yeah. All right, my next one comes from the Catamounts. This is called Ghost Quartet. It'll be at the Dairy Center January 18th through February 8th. So this sounds like a little something different from the Cats. The last few shows they did were kind of more outdoor, immersive type things where you wander around and encounter folks. And this one was written by Dave Malloy, who wrote Natasha Pierre and the Great Comet of 1812, as well as a production that the Cats did in 2017 called Beowulf, 1,000 Years of Baggage. So this one features Nela Pekarak, who people will remember from the Lumineers, the cellist, who was also the Rattlesnake Cake creator. So there's lots of music, and you're sitting on pillows and antique sofas, sipping whiskey, and it's like a song cycle and interweaves 4 stories across 7 centuries. There's the fall of the House of Usher mixed in there, something about Scheherazade, a subway murder, so and all kinds of stuff going on with this one. So that sounds like a lot of fun from the Catamounts, and that'll be at the Boulder Dairy Center.
I'm excited to see this one next weekend, because I know the actors are also playing the music live themselves and telling all those disparate stories. So it sounds like a pretty cool storytelling convention, and something that I hope the Cats do a nice job with in that space there. So Next one is also a little bit unconventional and a little bit musical by nature. It is Jane/Air from Grapefruit Lab that features live music by Teacup Gorilla at Buntport Theater in Denver, running January 17th through February 1st. And if this show sounds a little bit familiar, it's a queer adaptation of Jane Eyre. It's because the company actually did it back in 2018. It was what Grapefruit Lab kind of kicked off their producing shows in Denver with. And so the show was such a success and people had been asking for them to bring it back that the troupe decided to remount it now in 2025. And they really found that it has a new kind of political resonance in today's day and age, because it's this story about women kind of standing up to their oppressors in kind of encountering issues of class, religion, gender, and sexuality head on in this kind of musical, gothic fashion. If you're interested in hearing a little bit about what the show might sound like in advance, Teacup Gorilla actually released the full album that they're going to be performing in the show on January 10th. You can get that wherever you stream music, or you can also purchase it on vinyl. This is the band's first foray into producing a vinyl, and I thought that it looks really cool. I'm honestly kind of tempted to get it myself.
Yeah, that sounds pretty cool. Well, my last one is a doubleheader, so I'm going to turn it up to 11. I guess we'll have 11 this week. So first, these are both in celebration of Martin Luther King Day. So the first one is from Betsy, and this will be at the Dairy January 19th at 2 and 7. It's called The Time Is Always Right. And so they partnered with the Boulder Ballet and the Boulder Philharmonic to honor MLK and other civil rights leaders. It's got music, dance, spoken word, and written and directed by Kenya Mahogany. Who, in addition to having a really awesome name, I think I've seen her in a few things. I think I saw her in a show at Curious, and I think she's been around for a while. And then other MLK show is Modus Theater. So this is the third year in a row they're doing Still We Rise. So it's a performance in alignment with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. It says after the morning marches and Inauguration Day gag, join Modus and the Reminders at 3 p.m. for an inspiring intersectional array of live music and monologues. So now that we hit 11, John, do you have any you'd like to call out as well coming up?
Well, you're so much more ahead of the game than I am in terms of what's coming up. I have a couple that are on my radar, but I don't know if they open this weekend or next weekend.
Go for it.
I think one of my faces to watch in 2024 or 2025 is Jenna Mal Reyes, and she's directing a show called The Heart Sellers at TheaterWorks. This is just another example of a local kid who's just really coming in to her own as a performer, as a director, as a writer, as a facilitator. She's just done a lot of great stuff in recent years. She just, I mean, I thought of her as a breakout in 2023, but she continues to break out. And the play Heart Sellers is by Lloyd Suh, and for those who've been around a bit, they might remember this particular playwright for writing a controversial play at the Denver Center about 12 years ago called The Great Wall, which sort of made up this entire story about the Denver Post and the Rocky Mountain News having somehow been responsible for the massacre of 30,000 Americans who were lured to China with this fake news that the Great Wall was coming down when it wasn't. And when they got there, they found they were slaughtered. And it was a very frustrating play for me as a person who worked at the Denver Post at the time, because the Boxer Rebellion happened, but this particular story was completely made up, but it was presented as if this was Denver history. So a little bit of a sort of consternation about that previous effort. But Heart Sellers is a two-person play. It's about two immigrants one's from Korea, one's from the Philippines. And it's about this unexpected friendship that develops between these two women. I think it's a wonderful example of a story that 10 years ago, there's not a theater in this region that would have scheduled it. And we are the beneficiaries of new storytellers. And new stories. And this is one that I'm really looking forward to because I get excited about stories that I know are going to take me to lands that are unfamiliar to me and to meet people I'm unfamiliar with. So that's on my list. I am also just looking forward, and I think this opens in another week or so. So I'm sorry if I'm out of the time frame, but it's called Hope and Gravity by Boulder Ensemble Theater Company. It's a Michael Hollinger comedy. It's a little bit absurd, but it's ridiculously funny. They did a reading of it last year.
Yeah,
it's a very, very funny play and fantastic cast, and that opens, I believe, next week. I defer to Tony on that. But there's so much to talk about. Like, God, there's so much coming up. It's crazy.
And Alex, actually want to hop back in with one more to get us to that, get us all the way to the headliners. She Kills Monsters over at Vintage Theater, which is opening also this weekend, January 17th, and runs through February 23rd. And it centers on Agnes Evans. She's leaving her childhood home after following the death of her teenage sister. But she then finds her sister's Dungeons and Dragons notebook that launches her into this kind of magical land that was her sister's refuge. What I think makes this production particularly notable is Vintage is partnering with a Insight Collab, which is Colorado's only Asian theater troupe, to kind of do this as a co-production. So this is a really cool play. It's being done in their smaller space over at Vintage, and it's a cool collaboration that I think more theaters should be open to trying. Collaborate 2025.
Absolutely, yeah.
I would also throw in my recommendation for that, just because I think we need to be advocates for fighting against censorship and those forces out there that are afraid of difficult stories. She Kills Monsters is based in the world of Dungeons and Dragons. It's a terrifically fun story, but it's rooted in suicide. This doesn't give anything away. This is the premise. It's about a woman who's trying to explore the sister that she's lost, and Dungeons and Dragons ends up being the world that her sister was really into. And so by sort of immersing herself in the world of Dungeons and Dragons, she comes to all of these truths about a sister who she didn't know as well as she thought she did. And we've seen some beautiful productions of it around town. And it is one of those plays that if high schools try to do it, they get censored. Parents complain about it. They don't want people anywhere near this play. And when parents and school officials don't want you anywhere near a play, I say you run to that play.
Yeah.
So
hell yeah.
Go see this play. Support local theater, but support freedom of ideas. And it's a great show, so you should love it.
I think that's a perfect note to end our headliners section for this week on. So these are a bunch of different shows that you can check out. There's a ton more that you can see on our calendar section on onstagecolorado.com. Now stick around, get comfortable, because we are going to throw to Alex's interview with Denver playwright Jake Brasch.
Thanks so much for taking the time to come on and talk to the OnStage Colorado podcast about the Reservoir. This has got to be a pretty exciting time.
Deeply exciting, and I'm thrilled to chat with you.
Yeah. So just real quick. So Jake Brasch, you grew up in Colorado. You went to NYU and Juilliard School and now live in Brooklyn. So the Reservoir is going to world premiere at the Denver Center's Singleton Theater January 17th, running through March 9th. I saw the reading of this at the New Play Festival a couple of years ago, and it was definitely one of those plays I was like, oh, I hope this comes back as a full production. So I'm happy that it's here. I can't wait to see it. It's a dark comedy about a lost queer neurotic mess of a 20-something moves home to Colorado to get sober, and it's got this really interesting story about this young man's relationship with his grandparents. So I just wanted to start by asking, like, what was the kernel of this idea? It sounds like there might be a little bit of autobiographical content there.
So this idea came about because I had always felt that there was an inherent connection between the fog of early recovery and my grandparents going through Alzheimer's and dementia. And I couldn't quite figure out what that wanted to be. But when I got a commission from the Sloan Foundation, which produces plays about science, I found this concept of cognitive reserve, which is this idea of what, if anything, can someone do to protect themselves from the onset of dementia or any other brain damage, whether that be from alcoholism or traumatic brain injury or whatever it might be. And the factors are all things that are logical. Like, it's the reason people do puzzles and they eat well or they sleep differently, or they're sort of trying to create new pathways in the brain. And that gave me permission to look at, like, how can I have this main character, who is someone in early recovery, go on a mission with his grandparents to improve their cognitive reserve and help them. And of course, what happens in the play is that rather than this man helping his grandparents, it's his grandparents help him. And as they sort of fall more and more into dementia and Alzheimer's, he's able to gain his life back. And it's ultimately a sad and difficult story, but also a joyous and hilarious story about what it means to be alive and to be here now.
Okay. And the main character, Josh, is also suffering from some kind of memory loss as well. So there's that overlap there between the grandparents, right?
Correct.
Yeah. I was trying to remember, because it has been almost 2 years now since I heard the play originally. What is the Reservoir? Where does that actual thing fit in?
Well, so in the play, it's the Cherry Creek Reservoir.
Okay.
And the beginning of the play, the main character wakes up from a blackout thinking that he's at the beach, then sees the mountains and is like, oh, right, this is where I'm at. And then the play, as he begins to get sober, sort of embraces the reservoir as a metaphor in all sorts of different ways for cognitive reserve, but also water is sort of a metaphor that he uses to understand the ways that pathways are made in the brain, and sort of the way that we are captive to the ebbs and flows of life.
Okay. Well, how far would you say the play is today from where it began with the early drafts? Are you still tweaking it up to opening night?
I am. I mean, the play has changed a lot since I wrote the first draft, which was 4+ years ago. And the thing that has been the experience in production is that there's only so much that you can develop in readings and workshops, right? Like, when a play wants to be on its feet, and specifically this play, which is a very physical play. I started out by saying I wanted to write an extremely physical play for older actors. And so these actors are doing jazzercise, and they're doing flowy arms to represent the river. And it is an extremely theatrical play that wants to be on its feet. So starting in rehearsal, I was like, oh, I need more time to get that person to hear. Like, that sort of very pragmatic considerations were the big things that I've been writing towards. And then just having a cast that is so brilliant has allowed me to be like, oh, I need to tweak that there and this here. And probably from the outside, I haven't done as many changes as it feels like I've done, but I've been tweaking all along. And, the thing will never be finished. It will just be shared.
Right. So the director is Shelley Butler, and I know, having talked to a lot of playwrights, some like are kind of hands off, and some are really like to work in partnership closely with the director. How is your relationship there?
I love Shelley. Shelley and I are buddies, and we just have the same taste, which is hugely helpful, and are able to productively disagree. But most of the time we're on the same page and we're working towards the same things. I pride myself on being a writer who is willing to adapt to what is actually happening in the production in front of him, as opposed to trying to preserve some vision of what I think it could be. I'm not an incredibly visual person. Shelley very much so is. So we're able to sort of tag team and be on the same page, and are both willing to be like, no, I know this wants to be this way, but are also both willing to be like, I don't know what this wants to be, and let's figure it out together. So it's been a hugely productive relationship. And I should also add Olivia O'Connor, who's our dramaturg, is also a big part of what has made this process extremely joyous.
Uh-huh. Can you dig into that just a little bit more? A lot of people aren't sure what dramaturgs do in this respect. What has been her level of participation?
Sure. I mean, the dramaturg is someone who is, I think the easiest way to describe it is like the editor for a book, right? Is someone who gets the script, sort of does the research, fact checks, but then also with new play dramaturgy specifically is looking at, okay, what is the timeline of the play? Does everything add up? Also, artistically, like, is this serving the next moment? By changing this, does this other thing get out of whack? Is just another pair of eyes to be smart about the thing that I'm making and catch all the stuff that I might not be able to see being so inside of the writing of it.
That's great. Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, it really depends on the play itself, what the dramaturg is doing, but that's really interesting use of that role as well with a brand new play. So this is a very funny play, but it's dark in places. You know, there's some people who are going through some serious shit in the Reservoir. So how do you incorporate humor to enhance this story? And is that a component of a lot of your plays? From looking at your resume, I think it looks like it is.
Yeah, I mean, my Hollywood line, right, is that I write comedies about things that aren't funny.
Uh-huh.
I'm sort of obsessed with the spaces in which we can laugh about the painful, gross, messy parts of our lives, because that's the way that I cope. That's the way that I got sober. That's the way that I've dealt with any adversity that's come into my life, is looking for the humor and finding joy in uncertainty. So that's what I return to over and over and over again. And specifically with this play, I set out to write a comedy about Alzheimer's and alcoholism. And I'm proud to say that I actually think I've done that, right? And without shying away from what makes it hard, right? It is about hard stuff. There's no way around it. But for me, what makes life worth it, even amongst all of the gunk, and I think right now in the world, there's a lot of gunk, is being able to point at something and be like, okay, that's so messed up, but it's also funny, right? It's also just the soup of life. And my family, you know, in writing this play, that is a big mission of this play, is to honor my family. You know, serious and silly belong together. They're married forever. You know, Jewish humor since the beginning of time has leaned on this. This is how we survive, you know? So the humor is serious. It's not like alternately funny and then bleak. It's bleak and funny, just like the world.
Yeah, for sure. So is it fair to say there'll be a pretty big Brasch contingent here to see this show?
Get ready. They'll come marching down the aisle. All of my aunties. My mom is bringing a bunch of her college friends to the first preview. I mean, everyone's coming out of the woodwork, which is thrilling. It's thrilling to have it be here and to have a play that is a love letter to Colorado happening at the theater I revered as a kid and to have it be my first professional production. It's a huge deal. And
yeah, a lot of times to get that much family together, you have to have a funeral or a wedding. So this is
so
you
just got to write a play about your alcoholism and they all show up.
So in the play, does Josh's path to sobriety mirror your own, or is it different?
It is different. I think I changed a lot in the play, some of which to meet the needs of the original commission, which, as I said, was a science-based commission. And then also just some things I changed for the story, for timeline, and then also to protect my heart and family, right? I think there's definitely a lot of overlap. And then there's also a lot that is sort of arbitrary or changed for other reasons. And I think that brings me some comfort to know that there is a lot of myself in there, but like folks won't be able to point to what is true and what is not. They will just experience a story. And strangely, the other somewhat esoteric thought I had is the more permission I gave myself to not tell my exact story, the more permission I felt to share the emotional truth, to share what it felt like to go through the thing. And that very much is mine.
Yeah, I mean, I just from looking at your website, I mean, I know being sober is a real point of pride for you, and a kind of a big identifier of who you are. So, in addition to the Reservoir, do some of your other plays in development have some of that in there as well?
Yes, there are. Recovery is a lot of what I write about. One of my big missions, I feel like, as a writer, is to let folks know that actually recovery is a freeing and joyous and fun and hilarious and kind of punk rock space. Because I think especially folks like, am I really going to have to be, going to those meetings and like tap out on all of my friendships and parties in life? And it's like, no, all of those things you'll have, plus like, some self-respect and some fun, So I have a play that is called Family Weekend that is actually loosely based on my experience of going to a 30-day program up in Estes Park, but specifically focuses on the family weekend at a rehab, and there are no addicts in the play. It's only their parents and significant others that come up and sort of commiserate and ask each other questions about what this means, and is largely about codependency and what it means to love addicts, and is also a comedy. And then there are little whispers here and there in other plays that are not even specifically about recovery, that look at spirituality within the context of a sort of recovery lens, and just folks going through it. I think addicts are hilarious and neurotic and fun to write.
Yeah, it can be very messy, and they definitely generate a lot of stories from what they're going through. So that makes a lot of sense. So this is a world premiere here in Denver, but there's also a co-production between the Denver Center, the Alliance Theater, and Geffen Playhouse. So that is makes it even triply exciting. So how did that all come about?
I mean, the answer is through some glorious randomness and a lot of love and advocacy for the play. The Alliance connection is that I was a finalist with the play for the Candida Festival, for the Candida National Playwriting Competition, which is for graduate school level playwrights. They have a competition and one person wins, and then they have finalists that have readings. And so I had a reading there last year. They loved the play. When they found out that the Denver Center planned to do it, they're like, we want in on that. The way that the Geffen got involved was that Olivia O'Connor, who's our dramaturg, came to the Colorado New Play Summit where the play was a couple of years ago, and loved the play and brought it back. So that's how that happened.
That's great. Very exciting. So you have at least 5 other plays in development. I was just looking at some of them. So How to Draw a Triangle, the one you just mentioned, Spin, Trip Around the Sun. So which of these are closest to the finish line? What might we see on stage next?
So Trip Around the Sun, which is a 2-hander about, it's sort of, I like to say, a cousin play to the Reservoir, in that it's also about dementia, but it's specifically about 2 parrot heads in South Florida who are sort of dealing with what does it mean to be staring down the barrel of this disease even before it hits them, and is a comedy about, loosely based on me dragging some of my Jimmy Buffett loving relatives. That's I can't say quite yet where that will be, but it will be shared in 2025. I'm hopefully bringing a show to the Edinburgh Fringe with my writing partner Nadia Leonhard Hooper, to the which is called, you might have to bleep this one, but our group is called American Sing Song, and we perform and write what we call impossible musicals, which are musicals written for hundreds or thousands of characters. We sing all of the music, play all of the characters. I play all of the music, and she does all of the sound. And the piece is called Ass Presents Hole. And Hole is about a community of people who wear butt plugs at all times. So that okay. you can look forward to that. And this may or may not be my final interview, but come see that in
I think
Scotland
it's okay.
in August. And then a couple other little things that are happening. How to Draw a Triangle is a play that is loosely based on little Jake, who severely dealt with motor skills and hand-eye coordination issues, and is about a little kid who goes to an occupational therapist who is the only sort of queer presenting person in his world, even though she is an introvert and a snowboarder and very much not someone that he would connect with organically. They do really see each other in a world that is very homogenous. So that's that play, and hopefully stay tuned for information on that one as well.
Okay. Yeah, I was very intrigued by the American Sing Song, which is it's described on your resume as a collective that writes and performs filthy hour-long comedic musicals. And I'm like, I think we need more of that in our lives too.
I agree. I mean, we gotta laugh, right?
Yeah.
I mean, this is the thing that I'm thinking about a lot right now in the world. We have to laugh, but we also don't want to just laugh at things that don't pertain, right? We want to laugh because we want to actually figure it out. And even Ass Presents Whole stays true to my mission in that it's about groupthink and sort of, a cult of people And I think that in Nebraska, that very much pertains to what I see happening in the heartland right now of people sort of, falling into ways of thinking that they might not quite know how much they're being controlled.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had one more question I wanted to ask you about the development process. So, I know that, from looking through some of your information, it's, your plays or development it can mean a lot of things. It can go on for a very long time. Like you said, your first draft of the Reservoir was 4 years ago. Do you sometimes feel like the development process can go on too long? Maybe you want to be like those old playwrights who had no development process, or somewhere in between. What's your thoughts on that?
Definitely somewhere in between. I do like baking things before I share them. Like, I like to be able to be in a room, be with actors, be with the director, be with the dramaturg. I like when my plays grow beyond me and take on a life of their own. And I find that very difficult to do without development. That being said, oftentimes there's a lot more development opportunities than there are production opportunities, which I think has the obvious consequence of a lot of plays don't get to where they need to be, or by the time that they do get to where they need to be, they're overbaked, or they're way too ready, or they were written 15 years ago, right? It's hard to get relevance within that model. The other thing that I think I've experienced is that it also tricks you into writing towards readings, right? You have all of these opportunities to share your plays in the context of folks reading them at music stands. And then it's not until you begin to stage them that you realize, oh, I was writing towards a reading, as opposed to imagining that this would actually one day have a well-funded production because of the scarcity of that, right? Because there's so few of those.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I want writers to believe that can happen and write those plays that are physical and challenging from a design perspective. So I have thought a lot about, like, what are development pathways that can include, maybe workshop productions, something that could be an intermediary stage in between readings and productions. So if someone throws me $40 million, maybe I'll start that nonprofit.
Okay.
You want Alex? Do you got the money for me?
I don't know, but I may know someone, but we'll see.
Okay.
All right, last question. What's this in your bio about having 14 pairs of glasses, and do you always stay at that exact number?
Oh, I do not always stay at that exact number. That was actually, I think we're up to 20 something, to be perfectly honest. I had the same pair of red glasses for like my whole life. Not my whole life, but for 10 years, and they broke. And then I realized that we're in this brand new era of cheap glasses online. And I was like, oh, I'm going to be the colorful glasses guy. And it's just gotten absolutely out of control. But I do decide who I want to be every day. And I'll be like, today is my old lady Wednesday. And I rock. Today I'm wearing, you can't see on the radio, but I'm wearing pink glasses, and it's giving approachable homosexual, I would say.
Yeah, I think they work. They're working for you. You're rocking them. So great. Well, Jake Brasch, thanks so much for taking the time. I know you're in the final stages of getting this thing up. It's the Reservoir, January 17th. It opens in previews and runs through March 9th. At the Denver Center, the Singleton Theater. Best of luck, break legs all around, Jake, and I can't wait to see it. And thanks again for taking the time.
Thank you so much. I appreciate chatting with you.
All right, thanks.
And we're back. It was so great to have Jake on the show this week and hear just a little bit more about the play he's working on. Thanks for doing that interview, Alex.
Absolutely, yeah, I can't wait to see it. Definitely been kind of waiting for this one. So when a lot of times when we go to readings, especially the New Play Summit, we always have our opinions about things that we really want to see in a full production, and this was definitely one of them. So really excited to check it out. So. All right. Well, so we'll have some fresh reviews on the site soon. It's been a little dry, but like I said, we've got 39 Steps from OnStage. We'll be covering Vanya and Sonia and Masha and Spike at Town Hall, which I'm also really excited about. Mary Poppins that we talked about. The Case for Existence of God at Curious. I'll be at that one. Sisters of Swing at Vintage, and then Beauty Queen from Invictus that we talked about earlier. So lots of stuff that'll be coming up.
Yeah. And before we go for this week, just a quick heads up that on Sunday, January 19th at 7 p.m., we'll be hosting the second annual OnStage Colorado Awards for Theatrical Excellence, aka the Oscars, on a Facebook live stream that you can tune into. So like last year, we're just going to be presenting a slew of awards that seeks to recognize kind of the breadth of talent all across the state.
Yeah, so John, this is the opposite of what you were talking about for your awards. This is really so we did get to 200 shows in 2024, and so these are based on actual people who are in the scene, and we don't put the nominations out ahead of time. We don't limit it to X number of people, but we do have to winnow it down because there's so many deserving names. But we do every category could have up to 10 winners per se. So it's a lot of fun to do, and we really like to shout out all the great stuff that's going on, and it's different from other types. And the other thing that we do that's a little different is that we don't do actor, actress. We just kind of lump everybody in, whether it's a great performance or not, just despite any gender. So that's coming up. So John, what do you think of the Oscar Awards?
I followed him very closely last year, and I think that we're on the same wavelength. I think that it is important for media organizations, and you are one, to pay attention and to put a year in context, right? Like when I started the Ovation Awards, before there was any controversy about awards, it was, you look at it as a bit of history. Like when people look back and they want to get a snapshot of what Colorado theater community was like in 2001, they could go into the Denver Public Library and they could see these are the kind of plays we were doing. These are the kind of plays that were getting celebrated, and all that information is there. Because if we don't record it, it's just going to get lost in the morass of information that's out there now more than ever. And so I applaud that you have taken this on as your way to acknowledge great work of the last year, but also being mindful of trying to reduce trauma, frankly, that goes with them. I don't think Betty would mind my saying this, but I've had conversations with people start to see me as somebody who's just in some ways a provocateur in a way, because throughout the entire history of the Henry Awards, I have stood somewhat as a journalist looking in and saying these are the ways in which this program is falling short, and these are areas in which they need to improve. But at the same time, I was always participating in them as a judge, as as a person who puts together a memorial video. For years and years, I was the one putting together the slides that were being shown there. But award shows need to be constantly reevaluated and looked at with the changing times. Do awards do more harm than good? Traditional awards. I think in 2024, this is somewhat controversial, but it's worth the Colorado Theater Guild exploring the idea of have the Henry Awards outlived their usefulness in their present form, because the Colorado Theater Guild exists as an advocacy organization to promote and uplift the entire Colorado theater community. That is not necessarily the job of the local journalists, frankly. But weirdly, we kind of have it reversed at the moment, because I think your awards, my awards, they are trying to put things into a perspective where people are surprised, they're delighted, they're not hurt by it. And there's always so much controversy that goes around with the Henry Awards that, I had a conversation with Betty last year where I said, I think we've got it backwards. I think in some ways, we should join forces, and the Henry Awards should sort of become something akin to the True West Awards, where instead of, you throw out categories and nominations and 6 weeks of people stressing out about whether they were nominated or whether they're going to win or why they weren't nominated and such and all of that cloud of toxicity that comes in around that time of the year, and adopt a different kind of format where it really is about celebrating Colorado theater, where it's about putting people together in a room and doing something that's a great show, that is clever and surprising, and not just we're going to do a night where everybody just gets to sing a song. That's what they did before the Henry Awards. It was a disaster. Nobody wanted to come. But originally, the Colorado Theater Guild got it. They didn't necessarily, after the decline of the Denver Drama Critics Circle Awards, they didn't naturally evolve into the Henrys. There were several years of a gap in there where they did something called Celebrate Colorado Theater. And the thing was, it lacked imagination. It was a night where if you were about to do Mary Poppins, then you brought your people down and you did a song from Mary Poppins and as an attempt to promote your show. But it was just a night of like 10 of those songs, and that was it. And I look at it now where it's like, if you really crafted a show as the Colorado Theater Guild, but somewhat akin to what we're trying to do with our 2 awards programs, where it's like can you imagine a night at Lone Tree or whatever it is, and it's just going to be, there are going to be 30 awards tonight, and you can notify a place like Creed or whatever and say, you're going to want to be in the room. We're not going to tell you why, but we've got something special planned. And everybody's going to get their 5 minutes, and the audience won't know from 1 minute to the next what's about to happen again. And you can do song excerpts from great shows of the year, but you also don't have to worry about trying to get shows back together again that have been closed for 9 months. You can focus on the year to come and promote Colorado theater, but do an endlessly kind of like fascinating evening where people get together, and nobody feels like they were owed anything, though. Like if somebody gets honored, it's great. They feel good, but they didn't walk out of there. No one walks out of there feeling like they lost.
Yeah.
And I think if you're the Colorado Theater Guild, you exist to uplift, and that should be your goal. And I think you could sell out a house every year, just like you can, probably even better than you can sell out a night of the Henry Awards, if that was your focus. And people might be more inclined, I think, to look at the greater overall mission of the guild as something that's positive for everyone. And I kind of, this is me being a provocateur, I guess, because I'm like, I kind of challenge our community to do better, because I think we can do better than traditional awards shows that where 80% of the people who get nominated end up not winning anything.
I mean, if you think about the Henry Awards, it's said it's an impossible task to really do it right, I think. And I think your idea is, I can also think of, it's a big thing for the Theater Guild to administer, and I think there's definitely some other things they could be spending that time on that might be more like putting butts in seats or helping theaters, with their marketing and promotion and things like that.
Imagine a world, Alex. Imagine a world where there are no judges, because you're no longer determining best at anything. You might have a committee, and it's their job to keep track of all the trends all year long. It's to get to all the theaters, see what's going on, find out who the movers and shakers are, talk to people like journalists do, find out what their story is. You might come out of there with 30 stories that would make for an endlessly fascinating evening in the last week of July every year. I don't know. Tony, what were you going to say?
Put the organization and more in alignment with its stated purpose of the Henry Awards right now, which is the Henry Awards are supposedly a fundraiser event for the Guild, and yet it really isn't able to service that, since the only people who really buy tickets to the Henry Awards are folks who are nominated. And then, like you said, a lot of those folks don't end up winning. And then what kind of feeling does that create within the community? It's fascinating. I think these are good questions, valuable questions to be raising.
Yeah. Well, we're hoping.
You're right that they're a fundraiser, and they should be a fundraiser, because the Colorado Theater Guild, like the Denver Actors Fund, in many ways is operating almost completely out of the volunteer spirit but it costs money to run an organization like that. So you need an event that will fill a room every year and fill your coffers so that you can do programming for the rest of the year. It doesn't mean it has to be awards. Doesn't mean you can get a room full of people without having them be about bests. That's just, I believe that very firmly.
Yep.
I don't know if anybody agrees with me, but
yeah. Well, we're gonna I think we'll have Betty on the podcast here sometime in the next few weeks, so we can ask her about that. I think it's a really interesting thing to think about. So back to the Oscars. So check our Facebook page for that link to join, or you can find it on our calendar. So we'd love to have people hearing the awards as they're announced, but if you can't, we'll have it as our main podcast on January 21st if you miss it. And of course, all the winners will be posted online right after our live stream. Also, next week on the podcast, we have an interview from way down south in Durango. So Zachary Chiaro from Merely Players is going to be on. He's the associate AD there at Merely Players and the director of their upcoming production of Swing State. And so one of the things that Tony and I talked about was trying to throw the net a little wider for our interviews that, not just the Denver, the metro area. So we want to talk to some other theater makers around the state. So Zachary will be our first one of those this year.
Yeah, so if you want to stay up to date on everything that's happening in theaters and comedy venues across the state, subscribe to the OnStage Colorado newsletter, which comes out every Thursday. And if you like what we're doing here on the podcast, please consider leaving a review wherever you're listening now, and just tell other theater lovers in your life about us. It helps get the word out and grow the podcast, which we love doing. So that brings us to the end of the OnStage Colorado podcast for this week. John, thank you so much for coming on. It has just been so great to have you here. Do you have any last words? Anything you want to shout out that's on the horizon before we wrap this up?
I just want to comment. I came so close to getting through the entire hour without saying anything controversial, and I'm already kicking myself.
Oh,
didn't quite make it to the finish line, but that's all right.
That's all right.
What are you gonna do? No, thank you for having me. Thank you for doing what you're doing. You're blazing new trails. You're sort of going down an unprecedented path. But I know what. By the way, you guys won the True West Award this year. Did we mention that?
Yeah, we did.
Because
thank you.
Because OnStage Colorado is one of the big stories of the year. The model that you're developing, like Reaganomics, is unprecedented, and you're fulfilling a service while also trying to uplift the community at the same time and try to walk that line. And I'm sure there are a lot of other cities who are looking at your model and going, I wonder if we could make that work here. And I'm a huge fan of anybody who's setting, creating new paths. So good for you. Congratulations.
Thanks, John.
Thank you. If you're a theater producer who is listening to this in another state, please consider listening out. We'd love to have that conversation about how you can make this work. We're happy to share all the research we've done here. We just want to see arts covered. Because otherwise, traditional media landscape's not going to do it.
Yep, and we do have some planning going on about what we can do in the future to expand and improve what we're doing. So keep an eye out for that. So. But thanks so much for listening. I'm Alex Miller.
And I'm Tony Tresca, and we'll see you at the show.